In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this top with ruffled off-the-shoulder sleeves. To make this top, I used a few stitch markers. I used 2 hooks, a 4mm and 4.5mm hook. And I used about 6 balls of Cotton Fair Premier yarns in the color, let's see, red, how creative. And it's a weight 2 yarn, and it's a mix of cotton and acrylic. I got it from Michaels. I'm starting by placing a slip knot on my hook and chaining 3. Next, I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the back hump of the second chain and 1 single crochet into the back hump of the next chain. So at the end of this row, I'll have 2 single crochet stitches. Now I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and place 2 single crochets into the first stitch and 2 single crochets into the second stitch. So for this row, I'll have 4 single crochet stitches at the end. Now I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and placing 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch, 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches, and 2 single crochets into the last stitch. Now I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and I'm going to place 2 single crochets in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in each stitch until I get to the last single crochet, and in the last stitch I'll place 2 single crochets. I'm going to repeat this row until the triangle is large enough to cover the upper part of my chest. So again, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, place 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch and 1 single crochet into each stitch until I reach the last stitch of the row, and I'll place 2 single crochet stitches into the last stitch. And here's what I have so far. This is what I have after 20 rows. I'm just going to continue to chain 1 at the end of every row, turn my work, place 2 single crochets into the first stitch, and 1 single crochet into every stitch until I get to the last stitch where I'll place 2 single crochets. I'm going to stop after my 25th row because I'm happy with the amount of coverage I get on my chest, so I would encourage you to hold the triangle up to yourself to see how many rows of the triangle you need to make in order to get the amount of coverage that you want. And be sure to count the number of single crochets you have at the end of your last row. At the end of my 25th row, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and place 1 half double crochet into the first 2 stitches, so I'm not increasing anymore. And then I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch until I get to the second to last stitch of the row. And I'll place 1 half double crochet into each of the last 2 stitches. I'm coming up to my second to last stitch, so I'm going to place 1 half double crochet there and 1 half double crochet into the last stitch. And this is what my triangle looks like so far. I've chained 1, now I'm fastening off my work. Now I'm going to make a chain that is long enough to reach from the end of the triangle, that's where the black arrow is pointing, to under my arm on my side, that's where the white arrow is pointing. So I'm going to attach my yarn to my hook with a slip knot and make 20 chains. Now I'm going to attach my chain to the last stitch that I made in the triangle with a half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the last stitch of the triangle, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to place one more half double crochet into that same stitch. I'm going to continue the row by placing one half double crochet into each stitch until I get to the last stitch of the row, and I'll place 2 half double crochets into the last stitch. Now I'm coming up to my last stitch, so I'm going to place 2 half double crochets into the last stitch. And now to match the other side, I'm going to chain 21. If you chained a different number, just make sure that you chain one more than you did on the other side. Now I'm going to half double crochet into the second chain from my hook and place 1 half double crochet into the remaining chains I have. Again, you may have a different number of chains than I do. Once I've finished placing half double crochets into the chain stitches, I'm going to continue the row by placing 1 half double crochet into each stitch from the last row of the triangle. I've reached the first 20 chain stitches that I made, so I'm going to place 1 half double crochet into each of the next 20 chain stitches. Now I'm coming up on the end of my row. After the last stitch, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and in this row I'm just going to place 1 half double crochet into each stitch from the previous row. At the end of this row, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and then place 1 half double crochet into each stitch from the previous row. Now, because I need the bottom of the top to be wider than the top of my top, I'm going to add rows of increase. I'm going to do a total of 6 rows of half double crochet before I increase on the sides to give the top some width. If you need the top to widen up faster, I would suggest doing fewer than 6 rows of half double crochet in between the increase row. If you want the top not to flare out as much, you can make more than 6 rows of half double crochet, and if you don't want it to flare out at all, I would suggest not doing the increase rows at all. I'm finishing up my 6th row of half double crochets, and my 7th row will be an increase row. So I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and for my 7th row I'm going to place 2 half double crochets into the first stitch. Now I'm going to place 1 half double crochet into each stitch of this row except for the last stitch, and I'll place 2 half double crochets into the last stitch. I'm going to place 2 half double crochets in the last stitch of the row, then I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and place 1 half double crochet into each stitch for the next 6 rows. I'll repeat the pattern of 1 increase row, then 6 rows of 1 half double crochet in each stitch until the top is almost as long as I want it to be. Keep in mind we'll add a couple more rows at the end to clean up the edge. This is what my work looks like after 85 rows. I've marked off the increase rows with stitch markers just so you can see where they are. And I've secured the last stitch with a stitch marker because I'm not going to fasten off just yet. Next, I'm going to make the back panel. To start, you'll need to know how many stitches you started off with on your front panel. When I ended the triangle, I had 50 single crochets, then I added 20 to both sides, so the total length of my front panel started off with 90 stitches. So with my 4.5mm hook, I'm going to chain 91. You may have a different number, just be sure to chain one more than the number of stitches you started off with on your front panel. Now I've switched back to my 4mm hook, and I'm going to place 1/2 double crochet into the back hump of the second chain from the hook, and I'm going to place 1/2 double crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. Now I'm coming up to the end of my row, so I'm going to place 1/2 double crochet in the last stitch, chain 1, turn my work, and I'm going to place 1/2 double crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. At the end of my row, I've chained 1, turned my work, and I'm just going to place 1/2 double crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. I'm following the same pattern repeat as the front panel, where I'll do 6 rows of 1/2 double crochet into every stitch, separated by 1 increase row. So here I have 6 rows of 1/2 double crochet into every stitch. Now I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and in my increase row, I'll place 2 half double crochets into the first stitch, 1 half double crochet into every stitch until I get to the last stitch, and in the last stitch, I'll place 2 half double crochets. So here I am now coming up to my last stitch, so I'm going to place 2 half double crochets into that last stitch, chain 1, turn my work, and I'm going to place 1/2 double crochet into every stitch for the next 6 rows, and then I'll do an increase row. It's important to make sure that you have the same number of rows on your back panel as you do your front panel. For me, that was 85. You may have a different number if you want your top shorter or longer. So continue your back panel using the same pattern repeat as the front panel until the back panel is as long as the front panel. So I've completed my back panel. The increase rows are marked off with stitch markers just so you can see where they are, not necessary for you to do that. I did not fasten off, so I have my last stitch secured with a stitch marker. Now I'm placing my front panel on top of my back panel. Just make sure that the yarn that's still attached from the front and back panels are on opposite sides so we can seam up both sides. Now I'm just going to line up the sides. I've placed stitch markers on the 15th and 30th rows on both the front and back panel just to keep the rows properly lined up. I'm single crocheting the sides together, so I'm going to place my hook into both the front and back panel. And then I'm going to make 1 single crochet. There are no definite stitches, but we'll want about 3 single crochets for every 2 rows of the half double crochets. So just make sure that your hook goes into both the front and back panel, and go ahead and single crochet all the way up the side. I'm coming up to where the stitch marker is. My rows are still aligned, so I'm just going to take out the stitch marker and continue single crocheting the sides together until I get to the top. I'm coming up to the end of the row. I'm almost done single crocheting this side together. Once I'm done, I'm not going to fasten off. Instead, I'm going to secure the stitch with a stitch marker. Now I'm going to single crochet the other side together the same way that I did the first side. Now that I have both of the panels single crocheted together on the sides, I'm going to turn my work right side out. I do still have the yarn attached from both sides from where I single crocheted the sides together, so I'm just doing my best to make sure that they don't get tangled. This is what the front of my top looks like so far. Next, I'm going to attach the straps. I'm taking yarn that's still attached to my top by one end, and I'm taking the other end that's still free, and I'm going to attach the yarn to my hook with a slip knot. Now I'm placing stitch markers in the very two beginning single crochets of the triangle just so you can see. It's not necessary for you to mark them off. And I'm going to attach my yarn right next to the first stitch on the right. There's no definite stitch there, but I'm just going to get as close to the first stitch as I can. So I'm attaching with a slip stitch, and now I'm going to change to my 4.5mm hook, and I'm going to make a chain that's long enough to make a strap. So I would encourage you to try on your top and figure out how long you need your strap to be. I'm going to make 55 chains. Now that I've made a chain long enough to make a strap, I'm going to switch back to my 4mm hook, and I'm going to place one single crochet into the back hump of the second chain and one single crochet into the remaining chain stitches. Now I'm finishing up single crocheting into the chain I made for the straps. I'm going to place one slip stitch on the top in between the first two single crochets I made for the triangle. And now I'm going to slip stitch into the other single crochet I made in the beginning of the triangle. I'm going to switch back to my 4.5mm hook, and I'm going to chain 55. Make sure you chain the same number of chains you did for your first strap. Now I'm switching back to my 4mm hook, and I'm going to single crochet in the back hump of the second chain from the hook. I'm going to continue to single crochet down the chain. Now I'm finishing up single crocheting into the chain, and I'm going to slip stitch on the very beginning of the triangle. Now I'm going to chain one and fasten off. And these are my straps. Next, you're going to want to mark off where you're going to attach the straps. I've marked off 35 stitches in from both sides. Again, I would encourage you to try on your top to get the most comfortable placement. So now I'm just going to attach the straps to the stitch markers, because after this we'll be cleaning up the edges around the straps and the top. Make sure the straps aren't twisted when you attach them to the stitch markers. Now I'm taking the yarn that's still attached from single crocheting the sides together, and I'm going to single crochet in every stitch on the side. Now I'm coming up to where the triangle starts. There are no definite stitches going up the side, but I'm going to place one single crochet for every row of the triangle. I'm just about done single crocheting up the triangle, so now I'm coming up to the top of the triangle, and I'm coming to where I first attached my straps. I'm just making sure they aren't twisted because I am going to attach the straps to the back now. So I'm putting one last single crochet onto the triangle, And now I'm going to slip stitch onto the first stitch of the strap. I'm going to continue to place one slip stitch into every stitch on the strap until I get to the end of the strap. I'm placing my last slip stitch into the strap. Now I'm going to place one slip stitch into the stitch next to the stitch that has the stitch marker. I'm going to place one more slip stitch into the next stitch, and then I'm going to single crochet until I reach where I started. I'm coming up to where I started, so I'm going to place one slip stitch into the first single crochet, chain one, and then fasten off my work. This is what one side looks like with single crochets around the edges and slip stitches up the strap. Now we'll do the other side. So I'm taking the yarn that's attached to the other side from single crocheting the sides together, and I'm just going to place one single crochet into every stitch until I'm 2 stitches away from the strap. So now there are 2 stitches left before the stitch that the strap is attached to with the stitch marker, and I'm going to place one slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. Now before I slip stitch onto the strap, I'm just going to make sure that it's not twisted. Now I'm going to place one slip stitch onto the first stitch of the strap, and I'm just going to slip stitch all the way up the strap. I don't need my stitch marker anymore, so I can take that out. And I'm going to continue to slip stitch until I reach the triangle. So I've slip stitched all the way down my strap. Now I'm going to place one slip stitch onto the side of the triangle as close to the top as I can get. Now I'm just going to single crochet down the triangle. Again, no definite stitches, but I'm just going to place one single crochet for every row of stitches I have on the triangle. This is what the neckline looks like. So I've single crocheted down the triangle and over to where I started, just like we did on the other side. Now I'm going to slip stitch into the first single crochet, chain one, and fasten off my work. And this is what I have for my top so far. Now I'm reattaching my yarn with a slip knot to my hook, and I'm going to attach my yarn to the back of my top with the right side facing out, in between the straps with a slip stitch. Now I'm going to single crochet over to my first strap until I have 2 stitches left before the strap. There are 2 stitches left before the strap, so I'm going to place one slip stitch into each of those stitches. Now I'm going to slip stitch onto the first stitch of the strap, and I'm going to continue to slip stitch until I get to the end of the strap. Once you've slip stitched your way up the strap, place one slip stitch at the top of the triangle and then continue to slip stitch your way down the other strap. I've made my way down the other strap. Now I'm going to slip stitch onto the first stitch of the back and slip stitch into the next stitch. Now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the first single crochet of this round. I'm going to end the round by joining with a slip stitch to the first single crochet. Do not fasten off. Next, I'm going to mark off where I'm going to attach the sleeves. I've marked off one stitch, that's 15 stitches to the side of one strap, and I'm going to mark off the stitch that's 15 stitches to the side of the other strap. Wherever you decide to mark off for the sleeves, just make sure that you leave yourself enough space to move your arms around comfortably when we make the sleeves. I'm picking back up from the stitch of the last round. I've chained one, and now I'm going to turn my work. For this next part, I'm only going to single crochet into the loop that's farther away from me. So I think that's the back loop. I'm only going to single crochet into the back loop. I'm going to continue to single crochet in the back loop until I reach the first strap. Now I'm coming up to the strap. So I'm going to single crochet until I get to the last stitch before the strap. And now I'm going to surface slip stitch across the strap. To do that, I'm going to make sure that my working yarn is in front of my hook. Now I'm going to place my working yarn under the strap. Now I'm going to slip stitch across the strap by placing my hook wherever I can in between the stitches and making a slip stitch. And I'm going to make 3 slip stitches across the strap. Once I've finished slip stitching across the strap, I'm going to continue to single crochet into the back loop of each stitch until I reach my stitch marker. Once I reach the stitch marker, I'm going to take it out, place one last single crochet into the stitch where the stitch marker was. Now I'm placing one single crochet into the back loop only, but I would actually recommend to place it into both loops. Now I've switched to my 4.5mm hook, and I'm going to chain 50 to make the first sleeve. I would recommend trying out the length of the chain that's going to make the sleeve to make sure that your arm can move around freely and comfortably. For me, that length is 50 chains. For you, it might be fewer, it might be more. Again, I recommend just trying on the length of the chain over your arm. Next, I'm going to attach the chain to the top. I'm going to attach at the bottom corner of the triangle. So right here. And I'm going to switch back to my 4mm hook. And I'm going to slip stitch into both loops of that stitch. And I'm going to continue by single crocheting into the back loop of every stitch up the triangle. I'm placing one last single crochet into the back loop of the single crochet before the straps. Now I'm going to surface slip stitch across the straps. So I'm going to place the yarn in front of my hook and under the straps. And now I'm going to put my hook wherever I can in between the stitches. And I'm going to slip stitch my way across. So I'm making sure that my working yarn is under my top, putting my hook in between the stitches where I can, yarning over and pulling through both loops on my hook. I'm going to place 3 surface slip stitches across the top. Once I've made my way across the top, I'm going to continue to single crochet into the back loop of every stitch down the other side of the triangle. Now that I've single crocheted my way down the other side of the triangle, I'm ready to make my other sleeve. I didn't do this here, but I would suggest placing one slip stitch into both loops of the last stitch before you begin to chain. I'm switching to my 4.5mm hook and I'm going to chain 50. Make sure that if you chain a different number, you chain the same number that you did on the other side for your other sleeve. I've chained 50 for my second sleeve, and now I'm switching back to my 4mm hook. And I'm going to place one slip stitch into both loops of the stitch that was marked with a stitch marker. I'm going to continue to single crochet in the back loop of every stitch until I get to my other strap. Now I've reached my other strap, and once again I'm going to make sure that my working yarn is in front of my hook and under the strap. And now I'm going to surface slip stitch across the strap. So I'm just going to place my yarn in between the stitches and slip stitch. I'm going to make 3 slip stitches across this strap. I'm going to continue by placing one single crochet into every stitch until I reach the beginning stitch. To complete the round, slip stitch into the first stitch of the row. Next, we're going to want to mark off a few stitches. These blue stitch markers are where the surface slip stitches are across the top of the triangle. Next, I'm going to place my second orange stitch marker across from the other orange stitch marker. I placed the orange stitch markers about halfway up the triangle. I'm marking off these stitches because we're not going to add as many double crochets for the ruffle in the stitches between the orange stitch markers as we will for the rest of the stitches. We're going to pick up where we left off after the last slip stitch and chain 2. Now place 2 double crochets into every stitch or chain until you get to the first stitch marker. I've reached the surface slip stitches and I'm going to place 2 double crochets into each of those stitches. Now I've reached the chain for the strap, so I'm going to place 2 double crochets into every chain. Now I'm going to place 2 double crochets into every single crochet up the side of the triangle until I reach my first orange stitch marker. I'm coming up to my first orange stitch marker. So from the first orange stitch marker until the last, I'm only going to be placing 1 double crochet into each of these stitches. So I'm going to continue to double crochet up the triangle and down the triangle until I reach my second orange stitch marker. Now I've reached the slip stitches at the top of the triangle, and I'm going to continue to double crochet one into every slip stitch, and I'm going to continue to double crochet one until I reach my second orange stitch marker. Now I'm going to take my marker out, place one double crochet in the stitch where the marker was, and I'm going to continue by placing 2 double crochets into every stitch or chain for the rest of the round. I'm finishing the round by placing 1 slip stitch in the first double crochet of the previous round. Next I'm going to chain 2 and double crochet 1 into every stitch for the rest of the round. Before I get too far into the second round, this is what my work looks like after the first round of the off-the-shoulder sleeves. I'm going to continue by placing 1 double crochet into every stitch from the previous round. I'm coming up to the end of my round, so I'm going to finish the round by slip stitching into the first double crochet from the previous round. Now I'm going to chain 2, and once again I'm going to place 1 double crochet into every stitch from the previous round. Continue to make rounds of double crochet until the ruffled sleeves are as long as you would like them to be. Every round will start with a chain 2 and then 1 double crochet into every stitch from the previous round, and will end with a slip stitch to the top of the first double crochet from the previous round. This is the front of my work after 10 rounds, and this is the back after 10 rounds. I finished 14 rounds of double crochet, and I'm going to stop here because I am sufficiently satisfied with the length of the ruffled sleeves. I'm also pretty tired of making double crochets in a circle, so now I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet from the previous round. And now I'm switching to my 4.5mm hook only because my work tends to curl up. If you don't want to switch hooks and your work curls up like mine, you can fix that by blocking your project. Or maybe you don't have that problem at all and you don't need to switch hooks. I'm going to start this last round of the ruffled sleeves by chaining 1 and then single crocheting into the first stitch and then placing 1 single crochet into every stitch for the rest of the round. So I've single crocheted into every stitch. Now I'm just going to slip stitch into the first stitch of the round, chain 1, and then fasten off my work. To clean up the bottom edge, I'm going to attach my yarn with a slip knot to my hook, and I'm going to attach it to the side of one of the seams. I'm attaching the yarn with a slip stitch to the side of the seam. I'm going to chain 1 and half double crochet into the next stitch. I'm going to continue to half double crochet into every stitch for the rest of the round, all around the bottom edge of the shirt. I've placed 1 half double crochet into every stitch of the round. Now I'm not going to slip stitch, I'm going to work in a continuous round, so I'm just going to place 1 half double crochet into the first half double crochet of the previous round, and then I'm going to do 1 more round of half double crochets. So I'm going to half double crochet into every stitch from the previous round. I'm coming up to the end of the round, so I have the first stitch of this round marked off with stitch marker, so now there's 1 space in between my current stitch and the first stitch, and I'm going to skip 1 stitch and slip stitch right into the first stitch of the second round of half double crochets, and I'm going to chain 1 and fasten off. If you wanted your top to be longer, you could of course add more rounds. Now I'm going to sew in my loose ends, and I'm done with my project. Thanks for watching.